Dopamine swipe, dopamine swipe. Followers, likes, double tap. Now they control your life.
What is going on, beautiful people? Welcome back to the 817 podcast, where we talk about the lovely city of Fort Worth, Texas. We get into politics, business, culture, you name it. If you care about it, we discuss it as we build out the fastest growing city in the country. I'm here with my co-host, Ann Zeta. How are you today?
I'm doing very well. It's nice and cool in here, although it's really still hot outside. I think that's going to be a reoccurring theme.
I am so pumped that we're doing this on Friday. We have an interview today with the president and CEO of Trinity Metro, Richard Andruski, and that's going to be an exciting one. I hope to just have my popcorn and watch y'all discuss, as I have a privilege to see that live. But the reason why I'm pumped also that we're doing this on Friday is that we get a free Sunday.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't mind. The Sundays have been good, but that's a nice thing to have some family time as well.
Yeah. I'm just excited to get, maybe just turn up a little bit more on my Saturday, and just enjoy it a little longer. Because
not have to get up early to record a podcast.
Yeah,
on Sunday
and
morning.
catch the Sunday morning news. So if you don't know how this works at the 817 podcast, we do 3 short stories, 1 big story, and wins and losses. And we do this every week, and we drop it on Monday. The reason is all great Fort Worthians are trying to go back to work, do their thing, and we want to be the start of your day as you think about how to make Fort Worth better. So let's dive into short story 1. Ann, what do we have?
Cool. So we have a combination of 2 stories for short story 1. The first is a Fort Worth magazine article that came out with Mayor Maddie Parker announcing her top budget priorities for fiscal year 2024. And in addition to that, the city of Fort Worth put out a news piece earlier a week or so ago about Fort Worth residents speaking out about what their top budget priorities are. And so the results of the input that people have given over the last couple of months on budget priorities have come in. And the bottom line is that the top requests were public safety, transportation, animal care and control, code, parks and recreation, and neighborhood services. And under each of those categories, they had some specifics. But with today's focus on transportation, I was just going to highlight that they would like highway projects finished. They would like to continue to make street repairs, to improve public transportation, which I'm sure our guest will be pleased to hear, and new street striping, which I have seen a lot of around town lately. But on the article in Fort Worth Magazine, Mayor Maddie Parker announces her top budget priorities. She indicated that as a fast-growing city, it's critical that we think not only about what residents need today, but how we will invest in how we prepare for the next 50 years, which kind of plays into the upcoming comprehensive plan update as well. So glad to see her looking forward, planning for the future and not just trying to play catch-up for today. But looking at, according to her list that she provided to the city manager, improving efficiency in the development services process, especially for small businesses, championing and innovating infrastructure and mobility projects that meet current demand and plans for growth, including a larger investment into the PAYGO funding for capital projects. So PAYGO is the budget that they put together every year versus bond funding that is done like every 4 years.
Glad you knew that.
Balancing the investments in new development with reinvestment in existing development, and combating the affordable housing and homelessness crisis by creating opportunities for affordable housing and home ownership. So those are all the kind of growth and development related goals, but I think she had some overall, I'm kind of scanning back through the article.
Yeah, and it just kind of seems like a common, this is kind of a mayor template to priorities overall. Like, this is kind of a rinse repeat. They're never that really exciting. Obviously, a big piece with public safety. We're going to get into kind of a public safety story later on. The exceptional city services and green spaces. That seems interesting. I don't know what that would look like.
Well, they are already doing some of that. I think they've done a reboot to the Development Services Department. It is now called Fort Worth Lab. And part of that was an emphasis on kind of alleviating the struggles that people trying to do things in Fort Worth were running up against when they had to go to the city to get permits and get all the things that they need in order to open a business. And you would hear people complain that that was a slow-go process, or that they would run into somebody in one department would say something and then they wouldn't be told about something else. And so every time they'd come back to check on where they were in the process, there was something else added that they needed to do. So they kind of put together a one-stop shop for development, and that is making sure that those silos are broken down and that people can get their questions answered up front and kind of streamline that process. So I think that's what they're referring to when they talk about improving city services. And then the green space piece, it's been a couple budgets ago that they started putting actual dollars behind that desire to preserve green space, where they have a fund that is actually available to purchase land that would be kept in open space, not necessarily programmed parks with ball fields and all those kind of things, but actual open space.
Yeah.
And so that's something that they are continuing to do. And then, as always, the emphasis on reducing property tax rate. The city doesn't have control over the value of your home, but the rate at which it's taxed is in their purview. And as they point out in here, they've lowered the tax rate the last 6 years, but I think it's been even more than that, because pretty much every year that I was serving on the council, we lowered the tax rate. So I think it's actually been like the last 10 years that the rate has been lowered every year. People's values are going up, so they're not really seeing a huge reduction or a reduction at all in their actual tax bill.
What is, so based off reading this too, so it says the budget items are set to be heard by the city council on August 8th, but it doesn't seem a lot of the transportation piece. You said there was interest in transportation by the public. There doesn't seem a lot of transportation priorities in this priority list. What thoughts or concerns you might have around the investment in transportation as we look at the growth of?
Well, she does mention championing innovative infrastructure and mobility projects that meet the current demand and plans for growth, including large investments. So that can be construed as addressing transportation, and that could include transit. So if you are developing your infrastructure in a way that prioritizes transportation, enhanced bus stops, priority bus lanes, bike lanes, things like that, that allow multimodal mobility, that is on the list, but I read the things that I think are important into that, and that doesn't necessarily mean that they will absolutely be included.
Yeah, my fear with the word mobility is mobility zones and like the whole investment they're doing around Alliance and like all these like, kind of transportation stuff that they're investing in from a business perspective. That's what it came off to me. But if that is more like the innovative infrastructure and mobility projects gave me this like, oh, this is what we are focusing on when we invest in Alliance projects as the world's mobility zone.
Well, maybe we need some clarification on that,
because
I read it as absolutely supporting infrastructure that supports transportation, which includes public transportation, in my opinion. So I think we'll definitely have to make those voices heard if those are our priorities for that type of funding and our priorities for what gets budgeted.
99% said that the city should establish a permanent program to conserve natural areas for future generation. Parker agrees. So it just seems like the big thing was conserving natural areas. To me, I'm going to be the non-seer of natural areas of Fort Worth. I'm like, where are they? Like, what is the pretty parts of Fort Worth? You guys can beat me up on that later. But to me, is this it almost kind of sounds like them saying like this is the older Fort Worthian saying, keep my Fort Worth the way it is and don't mess with it.
Well, I think there are open spaces that exist now, like the Nature Center and the Prairie Park on the east side.
Yep.
The name is escaping me right now. And so those open spaces do exist. And I don't think that what this means truly open space. It doesn't mean preserve the existing neighborhoods exactly like they are. That whole let's dip this area in amber and never see it change. I don't think this is different than that. This is an actual preservation of open space. And I think they're putting a lot of effort into talking about parks and making sure that people have access to the river. There's a plan called the Confluence Plan that Streams and Valleys has done that talks about making sure that all the neighborhoods have connections to the open space and the green space that exists in our city. But there is a lot of development happening. And so I think the concern is that all of that open space being eaten up by rooftops and concrete.
Yeah.
So, just building, 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 and without a concerted effort to make sure that there's some open space remaining, that all kind
to
of
me,
gets gobbled
that
up.
collaborative community construction should be like the main priority as we see all these fields turn into these chaos neighborhoods who got one road in and out of it. Seems like one of the biggest stressors on Fort Worthians that should be prioritized. And then, a stronger bullet for transportation and elevating our multimodal options as we continue to be just one of the most spread out cities. So I'm excited for our interview just to, how do you even game plan transportation for such a wide city? And I think that is, it doesn't come out enough in the priorities to be like, we have to figure that out.
Yeah. And I think the one final bullet on the list of priorities that the mayor put forward was the combating the affordable housing and homelessness crisis by creating opportunities for affordable housing and home ownership. So I think that's a really important, and it seems to have risen to the level of a top priority for our mayor as well. Now we just have to go about providing that and finding places for it and finding support for it.
All righty, so let's go ahead and move into the second story.
So our second story is circling back on, I think, a story that we talked about previously, that the Fort Worth Report did a community conversation about the future of Panther Island and had the consultant who is taking a second look at the land uses and the long-range plan for what Panther Island develops out to look like on that panel alongside a professor from UTA, Dennis, who spoke about some projects that his students did regarding making sure that whatever happens on Panther Island takes into consideration the community that has existed in Northside for years and years and years, and not just some shiny new thing for future inhabitants, future residents, future developers of the area. And so in continuing with that, the vision for Fort Worth's Panther Island is changing, and here's what the new report says. So this is reporting on the consulting firm's new report that describes the massive project as a once-in-a-generation city building opportunity. The $1.1 billion public investment to mitigate Trinity River flooding by building new channels will open up more than 5 miles of shoreline and 200 acres for development just north of downtown. And as they originally conceived Panther Island, it would focus on dense residential buildings with some commercial, and that they're saying this should be reconsidered. The consultant's findings show that Fort Worth has seen tremendous growth, market change, and shifts in priorities for the city center since the projects started decades ago. So it makes total sense that when you don't get a project done in the 20 to 30 years that have passed since you first came up with a plan, that you revisit that plan and make sure it's still relevant. So there's all this growth happening, and Panther Island is crucial to the region's economic development. The scale and location can help capture and fuel long-term residential and employment growth. But as we said, the city hired a consultant, HR&A advisors, to serve as the project manager and coordinate the vision. And they are taking a look at that and deciding what's going to happen, because they want to avoid displacing surrounding communities such as the historic North Side.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about Panther Island who's pretty connected to it, and I asked him, when are you and I going to be walking down the street, walking down Panther Island, like talking and having drinks for happy hour? And he gave me 5 to 7 years. So I thought, okay, that's cool. Like, I guess we are closer. If you're talking 20 years, it took us to get to this point. So 5 to 7 years that there'll be some type of involvement is exciting. What is the part, if it was this article where they talked about once the, I didn't understand it completely, but they're talking about once the, I guess, openings of the river are complete, like we would actually have more land? Was that how, like, I guess, like,
well, there'll be more frontage on the channels, because there'll be more channels, like, around the whole thing, like an island instead of just where the river runs today.
Got it.
So I think there's additional river frontage.
Got it.
Because of creating this island.
I see.
But they're moving away from the residential focus as originally planned and envisioning this as a vibrant entertainment hub, outdoor recreation, and potential to attract companies and talent to the city. It would be a mixed-use development, usually occurs with a mixture of residential and anything from office to restaurants to retail. and that they want this to be kind of a flexible space where people can live and work and play, which is a planning buzz terms. Mixed use development that's going to include beyond the residential space, and that's kind of yet to be decided. But it should be pedestrian friendly, accessible through several different modes of transportation, giving the mix of large and small scale projects that could occur. And the report has said the district should be connected through a walkable interconnection open space network for this reason. So I think that means public space for people, not just, private spaces where people work and live, but places where people can come from the surrounding community and partake as well. But being complementary to the adjacent downtown and connecting seamlessly with the surrounding neighborhoods, the site contains multiple historic sites that could be uniquely redeveloped. And I think that's where we need to have all the voices at the table, because and not just people coming in and developing for the new shiny future.
Yeah, and we have a Razzoos and a David Buster's, that's
But they talk about who's purchased property recently and some of the ideas of things that are going to be happening. But there's also some redevelopment going on White Settlement Road, because all Autobahn is relocating. So all of that property that has been car dealerships up to this point could be a new residential and commercial corridor within sight of Panther Island as well. I mean, I think basically Panther Island is a continuing conversation. I know that our organization, Community Design Fort Worth, is going to be doing a design talk where we continue the conversation, mainly focused on the perspective of the Northside community. And that's going to be on August 30th. If anybody's interested, you can check that out. But I think it's encouraging to see that the consultant that's been hired is listening to all of the voices and taking input and focusing on a myriad of things that could be beneficial to a broader community.
It's a national firm that has offices in Dallas, New York, Atlanta, Los Angeles, Raleigh, and Washington, D.C. It includes Dallas Clyde Warren Park and other waterfront projects like Washington, D.C.'s Anacostia River, the University of Texas Research Campus Houston Buffalo Bayou, and the Ion Innovation District near Rice University, which that's also pretty beautiful. So definitely has the resume to develop something pretty intentional. All right, so now we're going to move into the final short story before we get into the interview. This one is just kind of probably the big goose egg of, loss in conversation. But in Fort Worth, Governor Greg Abbott showed up August 2nd, signing 2 key laws to protect Texans from illegal street racing. During the legislative session at the Bob Bolin Public Safety Complex in Fort Worth, 2 bills, House Bill 1442, which provides law enforcement and prosecutors additional tools to go after organized street racing and street takeovers in Texas and elicit more substantial consequences for the perpetrators of these crimes. And House Bill 2899 allows immediate removal of vehicles used in street racing or reckless driving exhibition from the road for the safety of other drivers. The bill removes the current requirements that a vehicle be impounded only if there was property damage or someone suffered bodily injury, and instead allow impounding if the owner is charged with racing on a highway or reckless driving exhibition.
And just so people know, a highway definition does not just mean like in the traditional sense of highway that you think of, like freeways.
Yeah.
These are public roadways.
Yeah.
Because most of this, some of this street racing is happening on our residential streets and the collector roads and neighborhoods.
Lancaster is hot for this. Like I'm like I can hear it just all right behind my house. But I mean, the part I want to hop in onto this part is, it's just I understand that street racing is dangerous. I understand that it's irresponsible. But you also just have what I think, to me, it's the villainization of these drivers. It's when Chief Noakes is calling them criminals, or Abbott's calling them villains of some sort, of like, these people are really bad. And I just think like that framing of people who probably do this because of cultural community, boredom, lack of things to do, and to make it seem like this is like the most dangerous thing going on in Texas is just probably the reason what it frustrates me. We're not talking about the people dying in counties' hands. We're not talking about kids dying over the summer from gun violence. We're positioning mass shootings and saying that's because of mental health, rather than those data points and those things kill and harm more people than street racing. So this is not, for me, the issue of street racing. This is just a classic. Even when you look at the photo of the release, this is just a classic. Let me show the old conservative guard that we're tough on crime, and we're going to put a bunch of police behind us and some cowboy hats, and then we're going to have the actors of the Full House Conservative Club, and it's Sheriff Bill Wayborn and all the other people, and then we play to that card. And I just think, for me, it's the making these street racers look like the worst people on the planet. Yet when there is a mass shooting in Texas, you say, oh, but it's mental health. Like, that to me was the frustrating part about this whole presentation and release.
And, for me, I look at the design of our roadways and how it's conducive to people driving in dangerous ways. And I look to try to find other solutions besides monitoring everything with our police, because you can't have police on every single corner. And if you pursue people who are doing these kind of dangerous ways of driving, that can enhance the danger to even more people, because then you're chasing people with police who are already doing dangerous things and making it even more dangerous. So I don't know what the solution is, as far as, hopefully this is a little bit of a damper on, they'll see that these are the consequences, or they'll see someone have these consequences, like losing their car, and they'll be like, maybe I don't want to do that. And so it's not a matter of trying to enforce it out in the field so much, because I think that, I know that the incidences that we have had here in Fort Worth have been absolutely tragic. And I know people who've experienced the street takeovers, and they can be terrifying. And so I think that there are other ways that we should be addressing it. I'm not necessarily saying that this is a bad thing that happened, but I think that designing our roadways so that people drive slower speeds, have infrastructure in their way, so it's not a flat out wide open without any, bulb outs and narrowing of the lanes and those type of things that make it so that it's difficult to just go full out as fast as you possibly can.
Yeah. And then I also want to acknowledge there's the quotes in here, and I know it's hard to, when you have a mic on you can say so many things in so many different settings to appease the audience that you're talking to, but just the villainization of large cities. This is a quote directly from our mayor. These type of incidents are all too common across the country. There are difficult times in this country. You have large cities falling apart because they're not focused on public safety. The only way you have a thriving large city that is focused on the quality of life is the men and women willing to wear a uniform and carry a badge. The two parts that I don't like about, just one, you're the mayor of a large city, and then positioning us like you're playing the small Texas, large cities, and look what happened in big cities are bad, yet we're representing a large city. And then the whole that our quality of life is aligned to, the police. Like, that is what, like, we are more happy if there's more policing. And that to me is just really, for me, like, lost in the element of that room and whatever was happening. And I think that these kind of things go unnoticed when the mayor does things like this, that most people will never hear that quote. This was just far down in a city, posting. And so, like, that to me was another, this would have been like my big loss if we didn't get to all of this. But villainizing large cities is something we just got to stop doing if we also are trying to be a large city.
Well, we are a large city.
Yeah.
I think. And I am partial to city life and city living. And so I tend to cringe at the demonization and the negativity around city, saying cities are struggling with these things. I think some of the things I pointed out were the design, but then also having resources available to young folks in a community so that they have other things to do and other things to keep them busy. Prevention of these things versus persecution and prosecution of the things after the fact.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's get ready and move into the interview. The interview will be with Richard Andruski, a public transportation veteran with 23 years of experience and more than 10 years of executive leadership. He was selected by Trinity Metro and to run and lead the agency. He also served as the bureau chief for police for public transportation for the Connecticut Department of Transportation. In this capacity, he oversaw public transportation in Connecticut, an operating budget of $850 million and a team of 110 planners, engineers, and rail and transit professionals. The Connecticut dot includes 22 transit providers that serve 80 million people annually. So obviously tons of experience. He's also done work with New Jersey Transit, and we're going to hear more about his Fort Worth story. So here is Mr. Andruski.
EJ, it's so great to be on the podcast. Thanks for having me. I got to Fort Worth about a year ago. Here for the job. Got a call early 2022. Said there might be an opportunity to come lead the public transportation system here. Almost turned it down, but my wife encouraged me to take the opportunity. One thing led to another. We couldn't be. I personally, professionally, couldn't be happier. But I'll tell you, my family's loving it here as well.
What made you almost turn down Fort Worth, Texas?
I know that's news to me. That's the first I've heard in all the interactions that we've had.
I tend to like to put down roots in communities. That's just the way I am.
Yeah.
And my family and I were very happy in Connecticut. We had established relationships, friends. My career was very happy in my career there, but something about Fort Worth really intrigued me. The more I got to know, just in terms of the interest in thinking differently and growing here, that's something we didn't have in Connecticut. It was a sort of a state that had not seen a lot of growth.
Yeah, and what is the biggest difference from now being in Texas or like in Fort Worth to Connecticut? Like you're like, man,
Other than the summers?
Yeah, there you go. That's a clear
brutal.
one. That's a clear one. Yeah.
Yeah. No, the heat's been definitely something to get used to here. Summers are a lot longer here too, right? Mm-hmm. In New England, summers would be somewhere between July and early August, and that would be your summer. I find that the biggest it's been an easy adjustment.
Awesome.
I mean, the biggest lesson for me here is that there's a great sense of community here. That we had small communities where I used to live, but they were much more sort of focused on the town as opposed to here. There's a sense of what it means to be from Fort Worth.
Yeah, I love it.
I think that big city, but still that community. And I love to hear you saying that you really get into the communities that you live in, because that's definitely something that I've done my entire life. And so maybe that's kind of what drew us to each other, our mutual love for public transportation and also wanting to be part of a community and improving a community that we live in. Yeah,
I tell you, I was really moved. I went to my first rodeo. It was fun to say that. And the pageantry and the sense of community as everybody comes together and there's the procession into Dickey's Arena. It was very moving. Yeah. And it's not just the rodeo. There is a collective sense of, festivals and gatherings and community events. And there is a special sense of what it means to be from Fort Worth, and which I find really makes me feel good about the decision to move here.
Awesome.
That's fantastic. Well, I know that everyone who listens to this pod probably knows that I'm a big fan of public transportation and that I've been an advocate
I don't think you have to just listen to the pod. I think everyone knows now.
Everyone knows that about me. Okay. So you and I have talked at several panels, and I've been, in several presentations where you have presented kind of what's going on with Trinity Metro, but you've been on a panel with multiple other people, and there's been, other views that are being expressed as well. So you haven't had kind of this unfettered access to tell the whole story of Trinity Metro, to share, to wax eloquently about everything that you want Fort Worth to know about public transportation and Trinity Metro, and do that without any kind of restrictions. So when I thought to ask you to come on this pod, that's basically what I was hoping that we would be able to do. And, I have questions about kind of what's going on with new bus stops and what's going on with funding. And recently there was an article about the extension of TexRail to the medical district. So those are all things that I hope you would touch on. But I would love for you to just have the ability to kind of share with Fort Worth where you think public transportation stands now, what improvements you'd like to see going forward, just jumping into any and all of that.
I'll start by not talking about public transportation. I'll start by talking about really why we generally need public transportation. And, Fort Worth, 13th largest city, we all know that, fastest growing big city in America. There's a reason public transportation exists in cities. And we see it all over the country and all over the world. We see it because it is a multiplier for the economy. It's a quality of life. It's about allowing people to move about freely, reducing friction so that people can connect. Cities are really about energy and creativity, bringing people together, new ideas, which ultimately leads, if you're more of a dollars and cents person, really leads to more economic impact and output. So what I've observed just in my 1 year here is we're not keeping pace, right? We have a city now that's about to cross the million person mark. Tarrant County, well over 2 million. We're growing and going to add another 1 million people in the next 20 years on this side of the region, never mind DFW. And I don't know that we can continue to grow successfully in relying exclusively on highways, right? There's whole groups of people that are looking for a quality of life, a lifestyle that is enabled by transit, downtown living, being able to get around without a car. Yes, there are people that don't own cars because they don't necessarily have one or can't afford one, but there are other people that this is what they want and they're seeking. And our competitiveness, right, is going to depend on bringing people to our region that are going to put us in a better position economically. And so I'm excited about that. I think Trinity Metro is certainly beginning to deliver on that promise, but there's a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I think with that growth you talk about, if everybody shows up with their own single occupancy vehicle and expects to be able to drive on roadways unfettered at high rates of speed, they're going to quickly find out that that's not able to happen. Not even, that point that you made about folks that either can't drive or don't want to drive. I hear stories all the time about people who could get to a job, but they either can't afford a car or they can't drive a car. There's people who have disabilities that make it so that they cannot drive. And we don't have very good options, robust options, multimodal options, frequent options in a majority of our city. And so you hear a lot of people talk about the way that our city has developed with its kind of large, far-flung. So I focus on the parts of the city that are denser and that transit can serve much more easily. Is there a combination that can occur where you can serve those dense areas with kind of traditional multimodal transit, but also kind of look at the region as well? I know there's a lot of cooperation going on regionally now that maybe hasn't been as robust in the past.
Yeah, for sure, right? We have interest from across the communities in Tarrant County, and interest in different types of services. So one of the things that we're conscious of is that we're not a one-size-fits-all organization, right? We're here to solve problems. Let's figure out, right, what we need to do to make transit relevant to each community. For Fort Worth, that means a fully multimodal network of rail and bus and on-demand services and bike share. But in other places, it might be a subset of that or something different. We're willing to work. We're working with Forest Hill, Mansfield, other communities that are interested in getting partnering with Trinity Metro, and so we're proud to do that. And I think that the business model of public transportation is changing, right? So it's the traditional fixed route bus is still going to be here, but we're going to be layering in these other options for folks.
And when you talk about other options, I know a lot of people bring up technology, and there seems to be like we're going to solve all of our problems with technology. I was glad to hear you say there's still going to be traditional, bus routes. And I've noticed in several construction projects recently that the city has incorporated some more robust infrastructure at those bus stops, for instance, places where there's shelter and shade and maybe signs that tell people like when the bus is arriving, and so that they can have a better experience as a passenger. So I think, can you speak to that? I know you and I spoke recently about some improvements to bus shelters, and I keep hearing from people across the whole city of when are we going to get better bus shelters and not just a sign stuck on the side of the road. So is that something that's ongoing right now?
Yeah, it was very cool. I had an opportunity to meet the city council and Mayor Matty last year when I started. And a lot of times elected officials, in my experience in other places, is that there might be a focus on big ticket initiatives. And, one of the first things Mayor Matty said to me is, let's get the basics right. Let's go out and make sure that the folks waiting at bus stops have a place to get out of the sun, out of the rain. And I thought that was very cool. That was something we could deliver on very quickly. We have 1,700 bus stops throughout the city, and every single bus stop will get attention. We're going to look. What does that mean? Well, it means different things for different stops. We have stops that are very busy that are going to get upgraded shelters, real-time signage will tell you when your bus is arriving. We're going to have lights at every bus stop, so you'll be able to push a button and a solar-powered light will come on in the evening. That'll help from a security standpoint, but also bus operators will be able to see customers. So we're excited about that. That's a substantial campaign, something we haven't done here in a very long time. But that's only part of getting the basics right. So we're going to be on the buses. We're going to be swapping out bus seats. Bus seats are made of cloth. They sometimes can get dirty, hard to clean. We're going to be replacing all of our bus seats in the next year. And we're going to be looking at better using technology to enable people to learn more about the service. So better mobile app experience, easier payment options, introducing Apple Pay, for example, at ticket vending machines. A lot of focus on that customer experience, getting that trip and that journey that they're making as easy and as painless as possible.
That's very cool. I'm very familiar with all of that stuff because I use it pretty regularly. And it was funny because in the last 2 weeks, I think, I got 4 calls from people with questions about how to take TexRail to the airport. And so I know that when we very first started that service, there was some issues at the airport with signage and wayfinding and that sort of thing. And I've seen improvements. But I feel like I know the system really well, so I go through and don't run into much of a barrier at all. But I think that people not having tried it yet are kind of want to test it out. But what I always try to remind people is I travel to cities that I'm not familiar with all the time, and I don't know how their public transportation works. So I get online and I educate myself, and I see if they have an app where I can purchase a ticket. I see, if there's route finding and do all of that. And that's all available for Trinity Metro. So are you finding some improvements in that area as well with TexRail to the airport? I know you hit 2 million riders recently.
Yeah, it's a huge milestone. Think about that. 2 million people have decided that train was a good option for them, right? So I heard, before coming here, I heard from a lot of folks in the Northeast telling me it's going to be a tough sell to get people in Texas to try transit. And that's not been my experience at all. If you go to a TexRail station, you'll quickly see the parking lot full of pickup trucks. And I say to folks, yeah, you can own a pickup and take transit. They're not mutually exclusive ideas. So I think we're having a lot of success. TexRail was important for Trinity Metro and the city of Fort Worth in so many ways. It was proof positive that kind of investment does work. It works here. It's worked elsewhere, but it does work here. We're seeing long-term ridership gains. They're sustained. So this wasn't like, oh, it's new, we'll try it once. We're seeing repeat business. The story I like to tell is the airport, for example. This winter, I had my first ice storm, North Texas ice storm. Yeah, that was something.
Yeah.
And the roads were shut down for good reason. People just weren't moving about. But I managed to be out at TexRail that day or that week and bumped into airline attendants and pilots. And I've got a photo on my phone. They were all sort of, there was this lively conversation going on the platform. And I went over to the group and I said, so what's going on today? So the airport's probably not open, right? And they said, oh, no, the airport's open. I thought maybe the runways wouldn't be cleared. Oh, no, the runways will be cleared. The planes will be de-iced. I said, so what's the issue? Well, they said the key issue was the airport couldn't get enough people, right? The ground crews, the terminal attendants, the flight attendants, the pilots just couldn't get to the airport. They said the reason flights were being canceled was because access to the airport was limited. And they also went on to explain that because they were riding, they were probably going to get reassigned to certain flights to make sure those flights went out because they were the key flights for American Airlines. And but for TexRail, that flight crew would not be able to reach the airport. And I thought about that, and I thought about that benefit that was happening, right? That transit benefit was kind of invisible to most people, right? Nobody knew that story, right? The folks, nobody would have the idea that the pilot on their flight that was leaving that day was able to get to the airport because of TexRail. And that story is repeated, and I'm a daily rider of TexRail, so I encounter these folks every day. And I hear these stories, and I think that's the story of public transportation. And that is, if you're a dollars and cents person, and a lot of people are, economically, what's the bottom line? You might look at the transit budget and say, wow, transit doesn't pay for itself. And in reality, it's quite the opposite. Transit pays for itself multiple times, many times over. It enables businesses to do what they need to do in a real and tangible way. And those benefits, of course, don't show up on our balance sheet, right? So when you pull our balance sheet and you look at investment versus revenue, you're going to see that we require public support.
Right.
But
it's not just the ticket price. And
yes,
that's not, because, for example, you've spoken at a couple of presentations about the transit-oriented development that happened in Grapevine and the increase in their sales tax that occurred once that station was open. So that also speaks to that bottom line of dollars and cents of what tax dollars were brought in, sales tax dollars that were brought in, but for people going there on the train.
People love Grapevine. I mean, Grapevine's got it going on.
We're here to talk about Fort Worth, Rich.
We are. We are. But I'll just point out that they've shared some data with us. And you're absolutely right, Ann. Business activity went up 80% if you were within a 5-minute walk of TexRail. So if you looked at business activity before TexRail and after TexRail, businesses that were located within a 5-minute walk saw an 80% boost in business activity. That tells the story right there, right? So we talked about airline and pilots and attendants, and now we're talking about sales tax revenue and business activity.
Right. And there are there's more than two. There's 4 stations in the city limits of Fort Worth. Is that right? There's TNP, Central, Northside, Mercantile.
That's right.
And all of those stations have land around them that is still available to develop, some of which is owned by Trinity Metro. So there are those transit-oriented development opportunities in Fort Worth as well.
Yes, and we'd like to be even more progressive about how we go about bringing those development opportunities together. I'll point something out. So Mercantile Station is under development right now. However, if you take a look at what's happening there, it's quite a bit of warehousing and logistics. In my opinion, that's a missed opportunity. I'll be a little provocative here and just say, here we had hundreds of acres of land around a high quality transit service, and it's becoming a warehousing district. And that's, to me, again, a missed opportunity. We really, if we're going to be making these kinds of investments, we need to be thinking about land use. Land use is a key. And perhaps some of the zoning there was set in place well before TexRail, but we do need to think more strategically, I think.
Yeah, I think those downtown stations have great opportunities with the zoning that's there on the south side, because it's both downtown and south side are connected to that TMP station. And then Central Station, we have talked several times on the pod about the development that's happening with Texas A&M, and all of those things that were empty parking lots right up against Central Station that are going to be something else. And it won't be warehousing. So I think those opportunities are ripe in those areas.
We're so excited about Texas A&M. I know everyone's talking about their new downtown campus. Really excited about the potential synergies there. Really hundreds of feet away from Central Station. All these new transit users, and let's face it, young people love transit, generally speaking. Students, a great way to get around. You'll be able to jump on a train to Dallas, get to the airport. Plus our great bus network too.
Yeah, it's all right there. Major transportation hub.
What does, doing transit in New England and then coming to a Texas city, what's like, wow, this is different. Why this is going to be hard. This is something that's maybe my experience I don't have in, or wow, this is going to be more difficult here than it was in New England.
I love that question because they are very different in so many ways. So in New England, for those of the listeners that may have not been there, they're really old communities that grew up around transit, right? So there's these railroad suburbs that are around Boston, around Hartford and New York City, and these rail lines were the first generation of quote unquote suburban sprawl, right? They predated the highways. This is how real estate was developed. It was developed around train stations. And so there's a well-established transit infrastructure there, right? People live and work in that area, ride the train from all walks of life. You'll see folks with very matter of fact, we did a salary survey, not just a salary survey, but a survey of our customers, and one of the questions was household income. And we found that along our busiest rail line, along the southern coast of Connecticut, the household incomes on average, exceeded $200,000. So the average income was over $200,000. So what does that tell you? It's not an income. It's not transit's not about serving one particular group of people. It's really there for everyone. I think the difference there is that there wasn't a lot of development or expansion, or there's a lot of infill development, right? So small lots being redeveloped, but not the scale of what's happening here, right? What we see in Fort Worth is thousands of acres of development,
all at once.
tens of thousands of housing units all at once.
Yeah.
And so I think that is a strategic advantage of sorts for us, right? We're still a young city. We have an influx of new people and new ideas. There's openness to thinking about different ways of doing things. And so far, all the folks I've talked to are willing to have a conversation, right? There's a willingness to say, what if we tried this? What if we, certainly a growing understanding that if we keep adding people, we're going to run out of room on the roads. And so when we talk about transit, it's not just serving people that want to use transit, but it's also, frankly, making room for others to use the highway system, right? So it's a multimodal, right? That's the idea. Got to have different options. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And we're a long way away from being built out, right? We still have decades of growth ahead. So I think now's the time. I mean, probably 5 or 10 years ago was the time, but now's the next best time.
Yeah.
And we've seen other people who haven't taken advantage of the now is the time ahead of time and are kind of playing catch up. And I think that those are cautionary tales that we can be like, well, they could have done it quite differently, and now we have the opportunity to do it differently.
It just feels like, like the federal level, we see the need for onshoring semiconductors, so we create this CHIPS Act, or we see the need of sustainable energy, so we do the IRA, and it seems like the Metroplex as a whole needs more acts or just its own style of that of, man, we got to really double down in transit if we're going to compete with this growth. Because there's, 2100 was that prediction that all these 3 Texas cities would be the largest in the country. And with Dallas, Fort Worth being number 1 at like 30 million plus people. What So like what kind of like call to action or investment you feel like we really need? It sounds like, I guess what I'm saying is like I hear about the Panther Island, I hear about Texas A&M, I hear about great stuff happening in Fort Worth, and it's like I feel like transit needs that story of this is the dream of what it could look like. You know, I feel like we're creating those dreams with Texas A&M, we're creating those dreams with Panther Island, but it's like none of it's being talked about. This is how great transit can be once we're also at that space. So how do you see creating a vision for people to invest more in transit in Texas?
EJ, that's a thoughtful question, really. I mean, there's, one thing, we're going to need allies in this, right? So we, Trinity Metro, need to keep doing the basics well. We need to keep providing great service today. We're beginning to think about that strategic vision. Actually, we're well beyond beginning. We're in the process of doing first a value proposition study, which is really an economic impact study that says, what does transit do today for our economy, for our people, quality of life? What is the value proposition of transit today? That study's underway. It'll be completed at the end of the year. So in 2024, we're going to roll that out publicly. The other thing we're beginning to do is the beginning of a new strategic business plan. And that's going to start with surveying, polling, and doing focus groups with all of Tarrant County residents. We're going to be reaching out to people, really getting behind the surface and going more than an inch deep on these issues and saying, what do you want to see? What matters to you? Do you like transit? Do you see value in transit? If you're not using transit, why not? Would you be willing to invest more in public transit? We need to understand that. Right now, I don't know what I don't know. Ultimately, though, it's going to require advocates. Your listeners, for example, if this is something that is important to them, we're going to need folks to step forward and take a community leadership role. Because as much as we as transit folks that know this business and this is what we do, we don't operate in a vacuum. At some point, there's going to be dollars and cents attached to the plan. We're going to need to figure out how do we fund it. And that's where the rubber hits the road, right?
Yeah.
You like transit, great. Are you willing to step up and help us, realize this vision? So, sort of a long way to answer your question, but ultimately next year is an exciting year for us because it really is the engagement phase, really reaching out and building up this support. And I'm open-minded, right? I'm open-minded to what we might hear. We might hear folks don't see as much value in certain things that we do, and that's okay. I need to understand that. And there may be things that we're not doing that we should be doing. So I'm ready to hear what folks have to say.
Yeah.
That's a good thing. I talk about the different things that are available, and I'm constantly giving people information when they don't have accurate information. So the other day, this article came out just recently about Trinity Metro selecting, you're going to have to pronounce it for me, Hewitt-Zollars. I know people who work there. I've heard them over and over again. I'm big fans of them, and I still struggle with saying it. So, and Trans Systems for TexRail's extension project to the medical district. And so this article was shared on some social media platforms, and one of the first comments that I saw was, well, that's great for the people who work at Baylor, but it's far away from all the other hospitals. How are people going to get to those other jobs? And, I rationally know that trains are not going to deliver you doorstep to doorstep. And so there's other things in place. And so my immediate response was that the hospital district is completely covered by a zip zone. So you could technically take a zip zone from the train station anywhere in the entire hospital district. Are there other plans for mobility in that area to alleviate the concern that in 108 degrees people can't walk in a walkable district? So there is some ability to walk beyond Baylor Hospital as well. But are there some other plans in that arena?
For sure. So keep in mind that we're building a network, and when you build a network, that happens incrementally. So what's exciting about the TexRail extension is it's 50,000 jobs with more or less within a walking distance of that new station. Certainly we have zip zone. We're going to be looking at this is a bit of a challenge, but looking at how we can integrate on demand with our rail service so that these are coordinated trips that happen, right? So when you get off a train, there's a vehicle waiting to take you to your destination. In the long run, that's the kind of transit network that needs to exist in Fort Worth. Really, there needs to be this complementary service like ZipZone, and in the future, it may be automated vehicles, it may be other types of technologies, but really the ability to connect our rail system and our bus routes to get people to their final destination. Let's face it, we do have some density downtown, but where housing and businesses are close together. But in most places in Fort Worth, right, we've got some space between, and so I think Fort Worth, more than most places, is going to have to require this layered approach to transit. And I'll just say that on that point, it's important that we recognize that automation of vehicles is not the answer to the future of transit. I can't say that strongly enough.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. There was an article in the paper this week about automated vehicles delivering packages, which was one of the things I talked about in one of our short stories, that I thought this technology is not going to solve all these things. And I worry about the streets being able to accommodate all these things and remain places for people. So I get automation. I'm not trying to dampen anybody's ideas about looking into possible technology solutions, but I agree with you that automation is not going to be the answer to public transportation.
Yeah, and we're not going to resist it, right? We're not resisting the idea of automation, but we have to recognize that in many places we're trying to move high numbers of people with the least impact on our neighborhoods, right? And if all we're doing is taking people off of a train or a bus, and instead of having a single vehicle with 20 people on it, we now have 20 sedans
running around automated.
Yeah, that doesn't seem to me like a really smart idea.
Yeah, it's like outside looking in from the transit world. Me and my wife have one car. I live off of East Lancaster. I mean, where I can walk to the big hub right across from the McDonald's. I could walk there. I never have, never driven it. It just seems like, right, why does automation get the excitement? It tells an exciting story. Why does a ultra boom train to Houston get a bunch of clicks on the internet? It just I feel like that is we have to get people excited about investing in a transit, because we all hate how hard it is to get to ATM Stadium to watch Taylor Swift. We all hate how hard it is when the World Cup comes here and we're going to be chaos. It's hard to live here when your friend comes to hang out in Texas and they can't do nothing if they don't rent a car. And have you been to the rental car center? It's the worst place on the planet. So it's just I feel like there's so much ways to get people excited to say, we'll get you to work, we'll get you to your concert, and we'll get you to the airport. And those three things is what we'll do. And I feel like that is the part that I feel like we got to get people excited about.
For sure, right? I mean, again, I'll go back to my earlier comment about we're here to serve lots of different challenges and problems, right? And yes, it's about mobility, and yes, it's about making it as painless as possible to get around. But we're also trying to create a quality of life here that you've got communities and neighborhoods that are thriving and that aren't burdened by traffic. Did you know that more than 30% of all the downtown real estate here in Fort Worth, downtown, is dedicated to parking? So 1 out of every 3 acres is a parking garage or a parking lot. Now that's incredible to me, right? That means a third more of the downtown could be restaurants, could be residences, could be you name it. And it could be productive and vital. And we all know we need some parking, but it's really, parking has become a burden. And that's just parking, right? And then we have our roads that have become so wide that they're unsafe, right? To cross as a pedestrian, you feel threatened.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, we all like to travel, and we've seen other places where this works. And we say, well, geez, why can't we do that here?
Yeah, yeah. So, going to the... I love that part where you're talking about in the beginning of time of Boston and New York. the train was truly like the creator of the first sprawl suburb. What is the relationship? You talked about Mansfield, you talk about other places, of them hearing about transit coming to their areas. Like, is it mainly positive? Because to me, people I feel like who are dealing it with the worst, when you and I looked at the data of who travels the longest to work, it's District 10, District 7. It's the people far Fort Worth, who then have like the one road into their development, and then everyone's in a line on the stop sign traffic. What is their openness to transit in far Fort Worth?
I love that question too. You're just asking the great questions today. So your audience members might not be familiar with a business group called the Real Estate Council. They are a group of folks that are very focused on the future of Fort Worth and what it can be. They did a survey recently of all Fort Worth residents. What they found was 78% of the respondents, and this isn't downtown folks, this is folks in all the districts of Fort Worth, 78% said they wanted more investment and expansion in urban rail. Now, those are folks responding to these surveys who live in these faraway communities that have long commutes. 78%, by the way, tells us definitely this is a bipartisan issue, right? You don't get 78% of anybody if you don't have people from both sides of the political spectrum. So to me, that says there's a mandate here to do more, to do better, to grow our transit infrastructure. Now, I don't know what that ultimately means in terms of routes and services. Yes, we're getting a great reception in Mansfield and Forest Hill. We're getting a phenomenal response. They were interested in introducing transit through on-demand. So it's a toe in the water of transit. We're going to try on-demand, zip zone, and grow into that. If there's a need to do more and go beyond zip zone, we're happy to fill that need. We're talking to every mayor and every council and anybody that wants to talk with us. We're willing to take a meeting. We're here. I don't think we've ever turned down a meeting. So if anyone has an idea, they want to sit down with our planners or me personally and talk about the future of their community, we want to be there for them.
Yeah. So I mentioned where I live, and right, I think the common thought is that you see the East Side use transit, but you also see that the East Side is very disconnected to the economic connectedness of Fort Worth. What have you heard about the development in East Lancaster and East Side, and how transit plays a part to get them engaged into the economic opportunities that are on the West Side and downtown?
Yeah, our busiest bus corridor in all of Fort Worth is East Lancaster, our number 89, call it the Spur. We see when I sometimes hear folks say, boy, I don't always see folks, your buses look empty to me. Well, if you haven't ridden the 89, you should.
That's not an empty bus.
It's not an empty bus.
And some of them are those double accordion buses.
Yeah, the very long ones, yes. So it is quite common to see 80 people on a bus in that area. We have a couple things going on. One is something called the East Lancaster. I'm not going to use. It's really a transit, enhancing that transit corridor. There's substantial local dollars, city and federal dollars that have been brought together to reinvest in transit. There's an ongoing study being led by the city. Folks should get involved and express their interest in what they'd like to see happen. What needs to happen, in my opinion, is we need higher quality transit, more frequent transit, and more transit that's going to support the development goals of that community, right? So what hasn't necessarily happened yet is transit has not led, the current bus system there has not led to
land use and economic development along that corridor.
You got it.
Yeah.
Well said.
And that study, that plan that the city is working on, takes into consideration the roadway and transit on that roadway and adjacent land use. And so they're kind of looking at that all together, which is the way it should be done, because then you do things that are complementary to each other and enhance both things.
Yeah. How much of real life is we're not getting the funding we need to do stuff? And so like all this sounds great of what we need to do, but like we just got to now do what we can with what we're given.
Yeah, maybe it's a little bit of both. I think in the East Lancaster example, I think there's real funding in hand that can be applied to a new solution there, but it's got to work its way through. And I know it's painful, right? But we've got to work our way through the conversation about what's going to happen there. It's got to be dictated by the local residents and businesses in that area, right? It's got to be something responsive to what they would like to see. When you talk more broadly about Fort Worth in general, we want to put the vision forward first. We got to have agreement on where we're going, and then the dollars and cents will, in my view, will follow. Where I have found in my own experience, where you're able to articulate a vision and a rationale, people will, where there's the will, there's the way, right? And we'll figure that out.
So we will have a price on this at like next year, or like will there be like this is our proposed budget to achieve this?
Yeah, I think next year is about bringing the vision, putting the vision together, right? It's I'm not sure we'll necessarily have a price next year, a price tag, but we'll begin to understand, what does this new transit system look like, and what is it? What are the limits? Are we going to add more rail? Are we going to have more rail lines going to more places? Rail is a more expensive solution. Folks are excited about rail. It is a more expensive option. Are we going to have more? Are we going to expand our zip zone network? Do we want to create bus rapid transit corridors, which are like rail, but operate with rubber tired vehicles instead of steel wheels and steel rail? So there's a lot of different ideas. We're going to have to work through that.
Yeah.
But we do have a project to connect the east side to Alliance. So Alliance is a huge job center, still growing. We've got these lanes on I-35, express lanes that can be used for transit. So we're buying buses right now. Going to be these coach style buses that you see, like charter buses.
Yeah.
They're going to run from the east side. Going to run on Lancaster Avenue into Vickery, into downtown, and then up the express lanes into Alliance.
Yeah.
So that's coming.
I think
awesome.
I've shared the story with you when I was going to Denton one time and I drove, and then I looked on the Go Pass app or whatever we were using at the time to see where in real time the bus was that went up that way, and I had to get off the highway in just outside of Fort Worth in an area that didn't have signals at the intersections. It just had stop signs, and so there was this huge backup of cars, and I was trying to get to a gas station because I was about to run out of gas. So I had to make a left and then go into the gas station. Then I had to come back and get back into the frontage road to get back on the highway. And during all of that, the bus passed me and got to the destination before I did. So I think those are the kind of stories, that these are options that are not necessarily always a worse option than driving your car. And that if we continue to only focus on driving cars, then that is going to become a worse option because there'll be so much congestion that we won't be able to get places in a timely manner.
Yeah.
That new service is going to be called Guaranteed Transit. And it's really simple. If you ride that service and we get you there late, you're going to get a refund. And so we're excited about that. That's made possible through the Council of Governments here. They've backstopped the revenue. And so to me, that's a whole different way of thinking about transit, right? What we're saying to you as a customer is try us, and we're promising you that we're going to get you there when we say.
Yeah. Well, is there any last minute things that we did not hit or things that you kind of want to share as we close?
It's really important that we plan for our future. I can't underscore that enough. Having been part of many big ideas in my career, these things necessarily take time. They take time to build consensus. It takes time to raise revenue, and it takes time to build. So even if we have a big dream that everyone's excited about and we all say, let's go and let's do it, and it's still going to take years, right, to deliver. So we really have to get going now. I mean, that's why we're moving now on this next generation vision of transit. We need to do it now. We can't wait. The people are coming. We know this. We see this, right? And let's make sure we're ready. So I really appreciate you having me on the podcast again. Thank you.
Absolutely. I think that this falls right into that. Let's be proactive and go out there and be in favor and for the things that we would like to see in our future. We constantly see evidence of people being upset after the fact. And this is a very good opportunity for the people that we run into on a daily basis who want to see this type of future to have a place to go in order to speak that into being. And we can all put it on our vision boards and make this be the future of Fort Worth.
And maybe we should have you back once you guys have your strategic plan or the vision next year to even talk more about it.
I'd love that. Thank you.
Awesome.
That'd be great. Thanks for coming.
Great to be here. Thanks.
All right, so there we have it. That was Richard Andreski with Trinity Metro. What great insight and context. Really enjoyed that and look forward to having him in the future.
Yeah, it was great. People are always looking to me to be an expert on transit. This was really an expert on transit,
Yeah.
so it was great to be able to go back and forth with him on the things that I'm passionate about, public transportation.
Manage almost $1 billion for Connecticut. I mean, just to do this work. So, I mean, so much experience that we could have dived even more into.
Yep.
So let's get into our wins and losses. And what is your loss?
So my loss today came from an article called Driverless Vehicle Company Cleavon Brings Self-Driving Package Delivery to Town Near Alliance. And this is an article talking about self-driving cars delivering packages and the technology that is allowing this to occur. And my comment to you when I first read this article was, because they reference in this article that these vehicles will go very slow. So they're driving 20 miles an hour, which everyone knows that I think people should drive slower, and that for the safety of multimodal use of our roadways, it's great for people to slow down. And as much as I love the idea of vehicles, regardless of who is driving them, whether they're driverless or have drivers in them, going under the speed limit, which in this article they talk about 20 miles an hour versus roads that allow you to go 25 to 35 miles an hour, I think this is kind of a little bit silly. Maybe for large campuses like those that are spread out in an industrial complex, Fort Worth could use this for getting things around. But I think bringing this kind of thing into our neighborhood just seems a little bit gimmicky to me. Mm-hmm. I'm not poo-pooing on innovation and ideas, and I would love them to continue to pursue looking at possibilities, but it just seemed like a lot of work by people to get these things to deliver things. Because, I mean, you have to be at home to punch in a code to open the vehicle to get your box out.
Yeah, we haven't had to talk about, like, I never talked to you about like the whole bird scooters like scenario. Like that's a great example of like, man, we spent all this money creating these fake $1 billion companies that then just had scooters trashed across
the city.
Yeah, trashed across the city. And that's just like, this seems like it can fall into that kind of bird category. And I just don't I just don't know the pain point of needing to make my packages come any faster. Like it kind of already works really well. Yeah. Like what's the point?
Other than having people not have jobs? I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I
mean, maybe, I'd be about this if it's like, they're just like, each school has one and they ship lunches to the kids at the school or something. I don't know. It's just like something more, it'd be cool. Every neighborhood had its own little Cleveland buddy or whatever you say, however you say this vehicle. And then you just send stuff around to each other. But anyways, yeah, I agree with you. So
I don't know, more places for people and engagement and interaction between people. And I think a lot of this technology just continues to kind of push us further and further away from other people, which I am not necessarily a fan of.
Yeah. Well, I like that you had what feels like a real loss today. So congrats there. And my loss is going to continue with the kind of just innovation piece. There was a recent, Seth Boding recently did an update on the adoption of Bitcoin mining. Fort Worth was the first city to start mining Bitcoin. And Carlo Capua came out, was the main talent in the story, being asked the questions. And one of the questions was asked is how much energy are we spending on to operate one of these Bitmain S19J Pro machines that runs for 24 hours, 7 days a week. And we felt like he couldn't give us an answer. He said, our rate with our energy provider is confidential, so I'm afraid I can't share the total electricity cost, as it would be easy for someone to reverse engineer our rate. All in all, I just feel like the lack of transparency on a side project like this, already like the whole mission of Bitcoin, technically, if you look at their values, is a transparent, public blockchain of everyone can see the data, and this is the opposite. So even if you're playing off of your Bitcoin Satoshi manifesto, this is not, you're not living up to the actual values of Bitcoin. Regardless, I just think we should have more transparency in our cities. But I am interested in going to this Texas Blockchain Summit in November 15th to 17th, just to see what crazy stuff is being said. Awesome. What's your win?
So my win was basically the guest that we had today, plus the fact that there was an article about the extension of TexRail to the medical district. So as everyone knows, I'm a huge fan of TexRail. I love the train, and it is a great option for getting to the airport and many other places along the way. But this expansion to the medical district is a huge win, in my opinion. And hopefully, I'm just going to speak it into being, because the next stop on that route, if we can continue on to those expansions, is Berry Street, which is right there near TCU, which is right near where I live. And boy, that would make it even easier.
Yeah, no, that would be nice. My win is Fort Worth school teachers' recruiting strategy looks to be paying off. School is starting back up, and we look like we are doing well on teacher recruitment, which is a very difficult thing to do. But Fort Worth ISD had 206 vacant teacher positions on July 26, a 42% decline compared to the 352 vacancies the district had listed on the same day last year. After the hiring event on July 27th, one of the reps at Fort Worth ISD, who is in charge of recruitment, said we would have an average of one unfulfilled teacher job per school, and that is a very strong number and very exciting. So for me, the win is to our superintendent Angelica Ramsey's commitment to the district. I feel like they've been doing a lot of strong priorities and transitions to make a healthy future for Fort Worth ISD, and strong teachers is one of them. They talked about the mentoring program, which also seems valuable.
Yeah, I absolutely saw that mentor program as well. I know a few folks that started teaching in Fort Worth ISD and struggled a little bit, and I think partially that was being a new teacher. So when I read here that, and I don't know if that's new this year or not, but it seems like something that didn't exist with some folks that I knew that struggled in this a little bit. But having a mentor, a seasoned teacher mentoring new teachers through the process, I think is a good step to supporting their staff.
Awesome. Well, there you have it, beautiful people. We just finished another episode of the 817 podcast. This is our 148th episode, so we're getting on to 150, really close. And so if you've been here since the beginning, kudos to you. You make us continue to do this work as we continue to create good content for the city of Fort Worth. Have a blessed week, and looking forward to seeing you guys next time.